This short introduction to the School Allocation Tool within the Balance System tools to support implementation of the delivery framework will just take you through the history and rationale for having the tool. So why do we have a school allocation tool at all? So what we need if we're going to implement a true school-based link therapist model where the link therapist is able to support the school in a whole systems way is a way of apportioning the resource essentially according to the needs of schools, and those needs will vary across a given geography. So what it does is it allows a way of modelling that need based on data. Which can then be used within that geography for the speech and language therapy service to be informed in terms of which schools are predicted to have higher or lower levels of need relative to each other. The process that we go through and how it works is a number of levels of analysis. So the first sweep through, if you like, doesn't involve any information coming from the service, but pulls information from the DFE. So information that will be very familiar to colleagues, number on roll, the ward, which gives us demographic information in the background, the proxy indicator for disadvantage of free school meals, the number of children reported on the SEND census data, both for school support and with EHCPs, and also pulling out those children and young people identified through that SEND census as having a primary need in the area of speech, language and communication. We know, of course, that there are speech, language and communication needs coexisting with many of the other categories of primary need, but nevertheless, it makes sense to identify specifically that category in this kind of modelling process. So that first sweep through the data gives us enough information already to start producing a rank order of schools based on their need through that algorithm. And what that does is gives us the ranking behind the scenes that allows us to apply straightforward stats to actually then band the schools into different levels of need. So our median band would be essentially from -0.5 to +0.5 standard deviation around the mean, the average for the given geography, and then the other bands will go above and below that at a standard deviation each away from that mean, which is a fairly standard statistical process, of course. Within each band, what you get represented are the schools and settings clustered by nursery schools, primary schools, secondary schools and special schools, because they're the categories that are recognised in the DFE data. Interestingly, mainstream schools with additionally resource provisions that are agreed locally are not a category at DFE level, so they have to be manually identified, and I can talk more about that in a second. So what we end up with, therefore, is all of our schools behind the scenes distributed on a normal distribution curve and then banded according to where they sit relative to each other. So this primary analysis is a good place to start. However, what we can then do when we're working with a service is ask them to put into the tools the known caseload for each school. And by this we mean that the children and young people who attend each school, regardless of where their current support from a speech and language therapy perspective might be coming. And that allows us to see what the known need is in each school, and allows us initially to do some very interesting comparisons. For instance, if there are 25 children with SLCN identified as their primary SEND need by the DFE data, or the PLAS data that's gone into DFE, but actually only 3 that have been identified as speech and language therapy, clearly there's an unmet need somewhere there that needs to be thought about. And the converse is also true, where you might have a caseload that appears to be over large compared to what that predicted need might look like, and they open up lines of inquiry potentially. But what the caseload allocation also allows is for a nuance of the banding of the schools, and sometimes a school will move band because of identified need within the school. There is a further level of analysis which we wouldn't usually recommend until the system has been in place for a while and is quite mature, which allows the individual children to be profiled behind the scenes and given a complexity rating that will differentiate between 10 children with a fairly high incidence type of need versus 10 children where 5 of them actually have a much more complex need and perhaps 3 have a less complex need, and that further can nuance the allocation. So why is this useful? Well, using the tool highlights schools who are likely to have greater need and can be predicted to have greater need. But most importantly, the linked resource allocation tool then allows the speech and language therapy service to take the resources it has available for children and young people of school age and apportion that resource according to a formula that will follow the bandings. So behind the scenes, they can model, for instance, that they're going to have X number of days available for a very, very high need primary school, or Y number of days available for a medium need special school. And that modelling automatically translates then into the tool and produces a recommended starter for 10, if you will, of how that resource can be spread across the schools, but based on a needs profile rather than any other metric. Obviously, we don't always get it right first go, and often, sadly, there isn't the ideal amount of resource available in the pot to be distributed. So sometimes decisions have to be made and different models have to be tried out. So for instance, it might be that there's a decision made to cluster very, very low need schools and provide their support in a different way, still with the linked therapist, but maybe operating by offering some of the school support in a video drop-in, or using remote training potentially as a way of doing that. Or there may be a decision made to say, well, actually, we're going to take a small amount out of each of the levels except the very high schools, because we identify those as potentially being the most needy, or anything else actually that you want to have a go at. So there's infinite numbers of models that can be tried out. And obviously where schools enhance their offer by direct commissioning of additional resources, which is increasingly common, then that should be on top of whatever the core allocation is suggested by the distribution of, if you like, the centrally funded part of the service.